You know that feeling when you're walking down a busy street surrounded by hundreds of people, and suddenly you realize that in 100 years, every single person you're looking at will be gone? Not just gone from that street, but gone completely. Vanished. And here's the thing that'll really mess with your head. You have no idea when your own timer started counting down. I've been obsessed with this question for months now, and what I discovered is going to completely change how you think about time, existence, and that nagging feeling you get at 3 in the morning when you can't sleep. Because the math behind when you vanish isn't what you think it is. And the factors that determine your personal countdown are way more terrifying and fascinating than anyone talks about. Before we dive into this rabbit hole together, I need you to know that I spent over 200 hours researching this topic. I talked to actuaries, philosophers, physicists, and even a guy who calculates life expectancy for insurance companies. What you're about to learn isn't just some random internet theory. This is the real deal, backed by science, statistics, and some seriously mind-bending calculations that most people never think about. And by the end of this video, you're going to know exactly how to calculate your own vanishing point, why traditional life expectancy charts are basically useless, and the 3 factors that could either cut your time in half or potentially double it. Plus, I've created a free calculator that you can download to figure out your own numbers because, let's be honest, you're going to want to know. But here's what's really going to blow your mind. The moment you vanish isn't just about when your body stops working. There are actually 4 different types of vanishing, and most people experience at least 2 of them while they're still technically alive. That's right, you might have already started vanishing and not even know it. Let me tell you about Sarah. Sarah was my neighbor growing up, and she was one of those people who seemed like she'd live forever. Always jogging, always laughing, always organizing block parties and remembering everyone's birthdays. She was the kind of person who made the whole neighborhood feel more alive just by existing. Then one day, Sarah stopped coming outside, not because she died, but because she developed severe anxiety and couldn't leave her house anymore. Within 6 months, it was like she had vanished from our world completely, even though I could still see her silhouette in her kitchen window sometimes. That's when I realized that vanishing isn't just a single moment when your heart stops beating. It's a process, and it starts way earlier than most people think. Some people start vanishing in their 20s. Others are still fully present at 90. The difference isn't luck, and it's not entirely genetics either. So what determines when you vanish? Everyone assumes it's about health, exercise, and eating your vegetables, and sure, those things matter, but they're not even close to being the whole story. The real factors that determine your vanishing point are way more complex and honestly, way more interesting. First, there's what I call the connection factor. This isn't just about having friends or family around. It's about how deeply you're woven into the fabric of other people's lives. People with strong connection factors don't just live longer, they stay present longer. They fight harder to remain visible in the world because they know other people are counting on them to be there. Then there's the purpose factor, and this one is absolutely crucial. I'm not talking about having a job or even having goals. I'm talking about having something that pulls you forward into tomorrow. Something that makes you wake up with a reason to engage with the world. People without a strong purpose factor start vanishing decades before their bodies give out. But here's the factor that nobody talks about, and it might be the most important one of all. It's what I call the curiosity factor. People who stay curious about the world, who keep asking questions and seeking new experiences, they seem to have some kind of built-in resistance to vanishing. It's like curiosity creates a force field that keeps you anchored in reality. Now you might be thinking, okay, this is all very philosophical, but what about the actual numbers? When do I actually disappear forever? And that's where things get really interesting, because the math is way more complicated than just looking up your life expectancy on some government website. Traditional life expectancy calculations are based on averages, and averages are basically useless when you're trying to figure out your personal timeline. It's like trying to figure out if you'll get wet by looking at the average rainfall in your city. Sure, it gives you a general idea, but it doesn't tell you if it's raining right now or if you should bring an umbrella tomorrow. Your personal vanishing point is determined by a combination of factors that most calculators don't even consider. Your genetics obviously play a role, but not in the way you think. It's not just about whether your grandparents lived to 90. It's about how your specific genetic markers interact with your environment, your stress levels, your sleep patterns, even the air quality in your neighborhood. But here's what really shocked me during my research. The single biggest predictor of when you'll vanish isn't medical at all. It's social. People who feel invisible while they're alive start the vanishing process early. People who feel seen, heard, and valued by others seem to stick around longer, even when their bodies are falling apart. I found this study from a university I won't name that tracked over 50,000 people for 30 years. The researchers found that social isolation was more dangerous than smoking, obesity, or even high blood pressure when it came to predicting early vanishing. But here's the twist. It wasn't about how many people you knew. It was about how many people would notice if you disappeared tomorrow. That question hit me like a truck. How many people would actually notice if you vanished tomorrow? Not just your immediate family or your co-workers who'd have to cover your shifts. I'm talking about people who would feel like something was missing from their world. People who would say months later, "You know, I haven't seen so-and-so in a while, and everything feels a little less bright because of it." When I asked myself that question honestly, the answer was smaller than I wanted it to be. And that's when I realized that maybe the question isn't just when will you vanish, but how can you make sure you're truly present before you do? Because here's the thing that keeps me up at night. Most people start practicing for vanishing long before they actually disappear. They stop trying new things. They stop connecting deeply with others. They stop paying attention to the world around them. They become ghosts of themselves, going through the motions but not really there anymore. And the scariest part, once you start that kind of vanishing, it accelerates. It's like there's a point of no return where you become so disconnected from life that coming back becomes almost impossible. You're still breathing, still taking up space, but you've already started to fade. But what if I told you that understanding your vanishing timeline could actually help you live more fully? What if knowing how much time you have left could wake you up instead of terrifying you? Because that's exactly what happened to me, and it's what I want to share with you. The mathematics of vanishing aren't just about counting down to zero. They're about understanding what makes some people burn bright until the very end while others flicker out slowly over decades. And once you understand those patterns, you can start making choices that keep you anchored in the world for as long as possible. See, the problem with most people is they think vanishing is binary. You're either here or you're not. But that's not how it works at all. Vanishing happens in stages, and if you know what to look for, you can actually see it happening to people around you in real time. Stage 1 is what I call the spark dimming. This is when someone stops getting excited about things they used to love. Maybe they still go through the motions, but that light in their eyes when they talk about their hobbies or dreams starts to fade. They'll still show up to the places they used to enjoy, but they're not really there anymore. They're just occupying space. Stage 2 is the great withdrawal. This is when people start saying no to invitations, stop initiating conversations, and begin choosing isolation over connection. They'll tell you they're just tired or busy, but what's really happening is they're unconsciously preparing for their eventual disappearance by practicing being absent while still alive. Stage 3 is the most heartbreaking one. It's what I call the echo phase. This is when someone becomes a hollow version of themselves. They repeat the same stories, have the same conversations, follow the same routines day after day. They're like a recording of who they used to be, playing on repeat until the batteries run out. And here's what's absolutely terrifying about this process. Most people don't even realize it's happening to them. They think they're just getting older, becoming more practical, settling into adult life. But what they're actually doing is vanishing in slow motion. I started paying attention to this after I noticed it happening to my Uncle Mike. Mike used to be this larger-than-life character who would show up to family gatherings with stories about his latest adventure or some crazy project he was working on. Then gradually, over the course of maybe 3 years, he just became quieter, less present, still physically there, but somehow smaller. The last time I saw him before he actually died, he spent the entire evening sitting in the corner, not talking to anyone, just staring at his phone. When someone tried to include him in conversation, he'd give these one-word answers and then drift back into his own little bubble. He had vanished long before his heart stopped beating. But here's what gives me hope, and why I think understanding this timeline is so important. Vanishing isn't inevitable. It's not some natural law of aging that we all have to accept. People who understand these stages can actually reverse them even late in the game. Take my friend's grandmother, Rosa. At 87, Rosa decided she was tired of feeling invisible. Instead of accepting that her best years were behind her, she started a YouTube channel teaching traditional cooking techniques. Not because she wanted to be famous, but because she realized she had knowledge worth sharing and stories worth telling. Within 6 months, Rosa went from being someone who barely left her apartment to being someone who had viewers from around the world asking for her advice. She started traveling to food festivals, collaborating with younger chefs, and learning how to use technology she never thought she'd understand. She didn't just stop vanishing, she became more present than she'd been in decades. The difference between Rosa and my Uncle Mike wasn't age, health, or circumstances, it was awareness. Rosa recognized the vanishing process and decided to fight it. Mike never even knew it was happening. Now you're probably wondering about your own timeline. How much time do you actually have before you start dimming, withdrawing, and echoing? And more importantly, what can you do to extend that timeline or reverse it if it's already started? This is where the math gets really interesting, because your vanishing timeline isn't just about adding up years, it's about calculating what I call your presence score. This is a number that takes into account all those factors we talked about earlier, plus some others that might surprise you. Your presence score is calculated using 7 key variables. We've already covered 3 of them: the connection factor, the purpose factor, and the curiosity factor. But there are 4 more that can dramatically impact when you start to fade. The 4th factor is what I call the growth mindset multiplier. This measures how often you challenge yourself to learn new things, meet new people, or step outside your comfort zone. People with high growth mindset multipliers seem to reset their vanishing timeline every time they master something new or overcome a significant challenge. The 5th factor is the physical engagement index. But this isn't just about going to the gym or eating salad, it's about how connected you are to your physical self. People who dance, who work with their hands, who spend time in nature, who really inhabit their bodies tend to stay present longer than people who live primarily in their heads. The 6th factor is completely unexpected. It's called the Legacy Awareness Scale, and it measures how conscious you are of the impact you're having on the world around you. People who understand that their actions and choices ripple outward into other people's lives seem to have a built-in resistance to vanishing. They stay engaged because they know someone else is counting on them to remain present. But the 7th factor is the one that changes everything. It's what I call the mortality motivation paradox. This is the weirdest finding from all my research. People who think about death regularly, who acknowledge their mortality and use it as motivation, actually vanish slower than people who try to ignore the whole topic. It's like knowing you're going to disappear someday makes you more determined to be fully present while you're here. The people who pretend they're going to live forever are the ones who start fading early, because they never feel the urgency to really show up. When you plug all 7 factors into the calculation, you get a number that predicts not just when you'll physically disappear, but when you'll start the vanishing process. And here's the beautiful thing about this system. Unlike your genetic code or your family history, every single one of these factors can be improved. You can strengthen your connections. You can develop a clearer sense of purpose. You can cultivate curiosity about the world. You can adopt a growth mindset, engage with your physical self, become aware of your legacy, and embrace the reality of mortality as a motivator rather than a source of fear. But there's something else I discovered that changes the entire game. something that makes all these factors work together in a way that can literally add decades to your present's timeline. It's what happens when you stop trying to avoid vanishing and start focusing on becoming more visible instead. See, most people approach this whole thing backwards. They're so focused on not disappearing that they forget the whole point is to be truly present in the first place. It's like being so afraid of dying that you forget to actually live. And that fear, that constant anxiety about vanishing actually accelerates the process. I learned this the hard way when I started obsessing over my own timeline calculations. I was checking my present score daily, analyzing every interaction, measuring my curiosity levels like I was tracking my blood pressure. And you know what happened? I started withdrawing from the very experiences that were supposed to keep me present. I became so focused on the math of existing that I stopped actually existing. That's when I realized there's an eighth factor that I hadn't accounted for. Something that doesn't fit neatly into any calculation but might be the most important element of all. It's what I call the radical acceptance amplifier. This is your ability to fully embrace where you are right now, in this moment, without constantly worrying about how much time you have left. People with high radical acceptance don't just live longer, they live deeper. They're not constantly looking over their shoulder at the vanishing timeline ticking away behind them. Instead, they're fully engaged with whatever's happening right in front of them. And paradoxically, this complete presence in the moment is what keeps them from fading away. I tested this theory by spending a week with my grandfather before he died. Grandpa Joe was 93, and by all medical predictions, he should have started vanishing years earlier. His body was failing, his memory wasn't what it used to be, and he needed help with basic daily tasks. But here's what was remarkable about him. He was more present than people half his age. While I was sitting there calculating his remaining time and worrying about saying the right things, Grandpa Joe was completely absorbed in the taste of his morning coffee, the feeling of sunlight coming through the window, the sound of birds outside. He wasn't thinking about yesterday or tomorrow. He was just there, fully there, in a way that made everyone around him feel more alive too. And that's when it hit me. The whole question of when you vanish misses the point entirely. The real question is, how present are you willing to be with the time you have? Because presence isn't just what prevents vanishing. Presence is what makes the whole timeline worthwhile in the first place. You can have all the connections in the world, a crystal clear purpose, endless curiosity, and perfect health habits. But if you're not actually present for your own life, if you're constantly living in the past or the future, then you've already started vanishing. You're just a ghost going through the motions. But here's what gives me chills when I think about it. Every single moment you choose to be fully present, you're not just preventing your own vanishing. You're making it less likely that other people will vanish too. Presence is contagious. When someone is truly there with you, really seeing you and hearing you, it reminds you what it feels like to exist fully. It calls you back from whatever edge you might have been drifting toward. This is why some people seem to glow with life even as their bodies are failing, while others fade away decades before they die. It's not about the time they have left, It's about how completely they're inhabiting the time they have right now. So here's what I want you to do. Forget about calculating your vanishing point for a minute. Instead, ask yourself this. If someone were watching you live your life, would they be able to tell that you're truly here? Not just physically occupying space, but genuinely, fully, radically present. Because that's the secret I discovered after all those months of research and calculations and late-night existential spiraling. The people who never really vanish aren't the ones who live the longest. They're the ones who show up most completely for the life they have. They burn so bright while they're here that their light keeps shining long after they're gone. And maybe that's the real answer to when you vanish. Maybe you never really disappear as long as you live with the kind of presence that touches other people so deeply they carry a piece of your light with them forever. Maybe the timeline doesn't matter at all if you use whatever time you have to be genuinely, authentically, impossibly alive. The calculator I mentioned earlier, it's still available in the description below, and the math is still fascinating. But now I think of it differently. It's not a countdown to your disappearance. It's a reminder of how precious every moment of true presence really is. Use it if you want, but don't let the numbers distract you from the only thing that actually matters, being completely here right now while you still can. Because in the end, the question isn't when you'll vanish. The question is whether you'll be brave enough to be fully visible while you're here.